Hey guys, today we're going to be doing a Link Thunder G4 Plus ECU. This is going onto our UZ VVT-i modular harness. So let's get into it. So as discussed, this is going to be a Link Thunder G4 Plus running on our UZ VVT-i modular harness. So this harness is designed to work for both the 1UZ VVT-i and the 3UZ VVT-i, and that's either 5 or 6 speed variants, not a problem there at all. Now, as this is a completely new build harness, again, as per usual, we're going to go through the entire build process from start to finish, and you're going to get to see all these sub harnesses that were built for the customer with the options that he chose. So let's do that now, and we'll be back in a minute.
Never break, always fight, never quit, do it right, play the game, win it life, have no shame, there's no time, feel the pain, live the grind, I could change, in my mind, pick a lane, commit and climb, the only way to win it life. I never miss, that's fact, taking big swings, put your hand to the bat, put me in the ring, you'll go out in a bag, cause I sing what I mean and I bring it to the mad light. Ain't got time to kill, I got time to feel, I took the red pill, I know life's short so I wanna live real, but how's it supposed to feel? How's it supposed to feel? How's it supposed to feel? They wanna say my name, but they holding back. They wanna say they hate, but they know it's cap. I ain't play no games, I just do that's fact. And I don't feel no shame, it's a mood you lack. I go crazy, nah, but I ain't lazy. Track after track, I work on this shit daily. Pass me the jack, right as fuel, got me hazy. About to unpack all these things I've been chasing. I've got visions in my head, like memories after death. To be a legend instead of something you can forget. I'm living up every breath, I'd rather lead than be led. I'll fill the seats as I spread with every word that I've said.
Right, so now you've seen the whole build process and what it looks like underneath. Let's get into what we're going to do today. So first of all, we're going to go through the layout to show the customer where everything goes. Then what we're going to do is we're going to do a couple of tests with the ignition on and a couple of tests with the engine running as per our usual setup. So to start with the layout, we're going to come over here towards the ECU, start from there, and we're going to work our way around. So ECU, as it's a Link Thunder, there are 4 connectors. Again, all 4 are differently keyed, so you cannot get them in the wrong place. So you don't need to worry about that at all. Moving along from the ECU, we've got our first breakout point over here. Now here is the wires that come from the fuse box and make their way into the harness, so mainly powers, etc. that are going in there. And here's a harness that comes out and goes into the fuse box as well, and that's usually signals from the ECU or to the ECU from or to the fuse box. Okay, so the fuse box has 3 connectors on. That one, as I just said, comes from the engine harness. This one also comes from the engine harness, but mainly from the ECU. And then lastly, we have what we call the customer plug, which is a plug of wires that the customers would then fit inside their vehicle. Things like power, ignition, start, fuel pump, etc. But we will go through all of those at the end of the layout. Okay, so again, all the plugs in the fuse box are differently keyed with different positions, so you cannot get it wrong. So you do not have to stress about that at all. Right, coming out of here now, a Link Thunder is jam-packed with inputs and outputs, and what we've done for the customer to avoid them having to ever go back into these connectors over here, we have actually populated the entire ECU, and any unused inputs and outputs are now allocated to some really nice DTM connectors, as you see over here. We've got 2 digital plugs, we've got an auxiliary plug, an analog plug, and then 2 CAN plugs, because there are 2 CAN buses on the ECU apart from the one that you can plug in from the front there. Okay, and you can see down here I've got an entire list of all of these connectors, what they're connected to, and so on. So that's what the customer gets with the harness over there. Moving along from there, we're going to get to our grommet. Now this grommet has got a piece of SCL heat shrink on there. Obviously we don't shrink it down because we want you guys to get the harness to your vehicle, fit it in your vehicle and get the grommet in the correct position for your particular setup, and then heat shrink that down to seal it up and make it waterproof. Okay, moving along from there, we're then going to get to our molded T-piece. So this is where the harness is going to split now. It's going to go that way and it's going to go that way. What we're going to do is we're going to go this way, pop back here, and then we'll carry on over there, as well as the breakout that comes over here. So first thing that pops out over here is basically your ignition sub harness. Again, so you can see everything is labeled. So that's IGTL, and there is the matching label IGNL on there on the other side as well. Obviously each individual connector is labeled as well. So that's obviously ignition 7, that would be ignition 5. Then we've got ignition 3, and over here we've got ignition 1. Okay, so again, these are made so that you guys can swap out the coils if you want. So again, sometimes these coils can be quite expensive. So if you cannot get your hands on these coils for a reasonable price, you can always phone us up. We can make you a harness either for the Audi coils or the 3UZ style coils, the smaller one, and you can just swap and change them out as you please. Moving along there, and then we get to our next breakout point, and that is going to be for our VVL, or variable valve timing left cam sensor. So again, there's 3 cam sensors on a 1UZ VVT-i and a 3UZ VVT-i, and we'll go through all of those. But you have 2 on the inlets, mainly to measure, or only to measure the cam alteration because of the VVT-i. And then we've got the one at the front that's going to be doing the synchronization. All right. So moving along here, the harness is going to come along to the front, and it's going to break out here by injector number 1. It's then going to go to oil control valve for the left bank. So remember, this is the left bank. You're always looking from the back of the motor. So that's the right, that's the left. It's also labeled, cylinders are odd and even. So it's 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6, and 8. Okay. Right, so also at the breakout there, it's going to come down here and it's going to go to the cam sensor over there. All right, there's a little sort of mounting or fitting point there that you could put a P-clip or some sort of plastic harness retainer in there. Then what it's going to do is the harness is going to come down here, and again, exactly the same situation. You've got 2 little mounting points there that you can get a plastic and a hook, and then obviously mount the harness and keep it out of the way. When we get down here, it's then going to split into 2 sections. One is going to make its way down through there, and that is going to be your crank sensor. And the other one is going to come down to a 6-pin DTM plug, and that is going to be your oil sub harness. Now in this case, the customer has opted for a Bosch combined oil pressure and temperature sensor, and he's also combined to retain the oil pressure switch that comes standard. Now this particular customer, as you can see, is actually using a 1UZ VVT-i. We are actually swapping out to a 3UZ throttle, and that's so we can fit a pedal box inside the vehicle with a drive-by-wire accelerator pedal on there. So we'll go through that in a minute when we get to the other side. Okay, so yeah, so that's what he's opted there for the oil pressure over there, and obviously his oil pressure switch is going to be at the back, which is why I wanted to show you that, because that is on. His is a 1UZ VVT-i, so that's where it's going to be, not over here. Right, so now we've got that all done. Let's go to the back, and then I'm going to stay on this side, and we're going to start with what pops out directly here by the T-piece, and then what we'll do is we'll move over to the other side. So starting with the basic stuff, because it's a Thunder, we have 2 wideband lambdas wired directly into the ECU. So that's the one for the left bank. We then have our ground strap, which then bolts to your M6 bolt over there. That is the only ground for the harness, so it makes it nice and easy. Then we have our fuel sub harness. Now in this case, the customer's not opted for a fuel pressure sensor, but he could also opt for the Bosch fuel pressure and temperature sensor if he so wanted, and he can add that on later. It is all wired up and ready to be attached if he wants to. Then we have our sub harness. So again, that is going to the intake, under the intake manifold there, and that's going to the knock sensors and the starter solenoid. As with every one of our harnesses, we have wired twin core shielded cables to the back of this connector here, so we can fit Bosch wideband knock sensors. As the customer is staying naturally aspirated, we're just sticking with the standard knock sensors for now, but if you ever did want to upgrade, not a problem at all, we can happily do that there. Next up is our injector and slash ACIS harness, or acoustic control induction harness. So this is the one that goes under the intake. It then pops out over here, and you can see it goes to all of the injectors. So 1, 3, 5, and 7. And I'll quickly pop around the other side so you can see that. And they're exactly the same. So it's going to 8, 6, 4, and 2 over there. So what that does basically is it keeps all the injectors as part of the inlet manifold. So you could effectively remove the entire inlet manifold without unplugging any of the injectors. You just have to unplug this one plug at the back. Also means you can upgrade the injectors very easily. You can phone us up and tell me whatever connector you require, and we'll make you a new sub harness where you can just unplug that one, plug in the new one. So no need to change any of your main harness. You're just changing your sub harness. Right, so that is that section at the back over there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pop over the other side and we'll meet back over there and see what's popping out over there. So harness again just runs all the way down the back here. You see I've got a couple of P clamps there and there just holding it in position, so that you can do. Now then, at this section here where I have it clamped down is the next breakout section. So let's go through what we've got coming out here. So first of all, we have our map sensor. So this can obviously mount onto the firewall there like that, and then you can run either a vacuum line to this vacuum over here. I use the one at the front here. Again, there are many options for you to use. Pick one that best suits your application. Then we have the other wideband sensor. So that's plugged in there, and that just goes out there as well. Then we have our accelerator pedal. Now, the reason we put this over here and not on the inside of the vehicle is because if you have a 1UZ VVT-i, your accelerator position sensor is actually on the throttle body itself, okay? Now, with our other harnesses that we do still have some with pedals like this, because then we can just run a pedal harness literally straight inside the vehicle, and these are dedicated to obviously left and right hand drive. We make both variations. So this is obviously a right-hand drive, and he's more than capable of, we just make a little sub harness from here that would then go inside and go straight to the pedals, which is in this case exactly what we're going to do. But it also leaves us open just to have this running forward, have a small sub harness there, which then plugs into the accelerator pedal position sensor on the 1UZ FE VVT-i. So that's why that is like that. Then we do have ignition right, and that is plugging again into those coils. So nice and simple. Coil 2, coil 4, coil 6, and coil 8, okay? Moving along from that, and then we have the next breakout in the middle, and that goes to our VVR, or variable valve right bank cam sensor. So again, that's measuring the inlet cams as part of the VVT-i system. Right, moving forward along there, and then we have a breakout at the front over here, and again, we've got quite a few things popping out, so let's get started on that. So the big one you see there, that is your throttle. So that is again an 8-pin one, which is a change from our 6-pin one that we normally use in the 3UZ, and that's because we have to allocate positions for the drive-by-wire clutch that comes on the 1UZ VVT-i. So that's why I said this harness works on both 1UZ VVT-i and 3UZ VVT-i without any dramas at all, no problems there. Right, next up we've got is our coolant temp, so again labeled CLT, and that goes to the standard 1 and 3UZ coolant temp sensor over there. Next up we've got our intake air temperature sensor, and we've got a nice long harness there with an aluminium mounting boss for the customer to then weld into whatever intake pipe that he's going to use. We then have what I call a gauge temp wire, aka it's something that you guys can fit inside your vehicle. If you're going to fit an aftermarket coolant temperature gauge, this wire then just comes inside the vehicle through the fuse box, and then you can wire it to whatever aftermarket gauge you want to use. Okay. Then we have the oil control valve for the right bank, and that plugs directly in there, so that's no problem there at all. And then lastly, popping out down here, we then have our alternator harness. So you can see again, that is labeled, and as per usual, it is on a sub harness, and on your 1UZ VVT-i or your 3UZ 5-speed, but not, there are exceptions, you have your sort of oval 3-pin plug over there. But as I've said numerous times, if you can't get hold of these alternators, then you can only get one from like a 2006 GS430 or 2005 LS430 that has the 4-pin plug. Just give us a call, we'll make you a sub harness for the 4-pin plug, absolutely no problem at all. Just bearing in mind that the Japanese crown alternator is completely different from the European and US LS and GS 436 speed models that came with the square plug, if you will, with the 4 pins. Okay, that one you can't just plug into that, you do need to have the ECU to control it. Right, okay, so I think that's pretty much everything in terms of the layout. Hopefully that's nice and clear and straightforward for when it is to be installed on the vehicle. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go through the wires on the fuse box for the customer to connect into his vehicle. Now, as there are literally 2 full pages of all of these extra, obviously I'm not going to go through every single one, but basically it's nice and simple. The can has 12 volts and ground, can high and can low. And again, there's 2 of them. Then digital is unused digital inputs. Digital 2 is again more digital inputs, because on the Thunder you have from 11 to 16, you have a positive and a negative. They can be used for things like wheel speed, etc. Then your auxiliary is auxiliary 11 to 20, and your analog is analog 8 to 16 with a built-in 5 volts and sensor ground on that one. Okay. And there's the entire ECU pinout. That's plug A, B, C, and D that the customer gets, where we've actually listed down everything that's connected to each pin, so they know exactly where everything is if the tuner ever needs to refer to that for something. Obviously, we set every ECU up for the customer as well, so when he gets this now, when he comes to collect it, basically his ECU will be ready to plug in and go. We set all the inputs and outputs out that are relevant to his harness. Right, so moving on to the 9-pin plug. This is our pretty standard 9-pin plug. So basically, I'm going to go through it, but if you watch any of our other videos, you're going to notice it's exactly the same. So starting with number 1, and that is going to be your red 14 gauge wire. Now that is a 12 volt supply. Now that is a permanent 12 volt supply, and for the Thunder it does have to be a permanent 12 volt supply, because there is permanent 12 volts that are going to the ECU from the fuse box. Okay, so I suppose you can connect it to an ignition, but it's not ideal, and ideally you'd want to connect it to a permanent 12 volt supply for the main relay circuit to work inside the Thunder. Next up after that is going to be black and yellow, and that is your start signal. Now, as with all of our link setups, it's actually the ECU that's controlling the starter in this case. Not that wire is not actually controlling the starter. So therefore, you just need to touch it. You can set that all up in the ECU, and I have done a video on that. If I have, I'll put a link up in the top there, but I'm pretty sure I have. So again, this is just a signal to the ECU. You can change it to either be going high or providing 12 volts, or going low and grounding out. That can all be done inside the ECU. For our purposes, we have put a fuse on there in case you want to use it, because the most common way of doing it is with a key barrel, and that's going to supply 12 volts. So it runs through a 5 amp fuse before it goes to the ECU, so there's no way you can damage the ECU with your ignition barrel from there. Next up, number 3, and that is going to be yellow with a green. So that's a yellow green over there. Now that's the wire that's attached to that temp wire that I spoke of. Okay, and that is going to be then, I've got it connected to here, because I'm using my cluster to be able to tell me whether that is actually connected and working as it should do. Right, that's number 3. Let's move on to number 4, and that is going to be your gray, I think 16 gauge on that one, and that is for your fuel pump. And as per usual with these ECUs, they are controlling the fuel pump, so you don't need to worry about that. You can obviously set it up to prime for how many seconds you want, etc, etc. But again, I've done loads of videos on link setup, so go have a look at those if you wanted to get that in more detail. Next up, number 5 is going to be yellow with a red. So you can see yellow with a red there where my finger is, and that is your check engine light. So I do always fit a check engine light with every single harness. I do always put the LED in the fuse box as well. It's kind of useful to have a check engine light. It tells you whether everything is on, especially if you have a standard dash, and again it will tell you any errors that you have that are going on there. Right, next up is going to be number 6, and that is straight yellow. And that's the one I'm holding in my finger there. Now that is your tacho signal, your rev kind of signal. Again, that is coming from the ECU, so it's completely controllable. You can set the multipliers, you can set the sweeping and all of that type of jazz. But again, I've done loads of videos on link, so I'm not going to dwell on all those little features there. Next up is going to be black with a red. That's the one I've got in my finger there. Right, and that is your ignition 12 volts, okay? So the Thunder is controlling all the relays, or most of the relays in the ECU. It's in the fuse box itself. So this ignition switch is basically, again, like the start wire, it's just a signal to the ECU. Now that does need to be 12 volts, I'm afraid. And I think you can set it up to go low as well. But again, we set it up to go high simply because that is the most common that you're going to find using a key barrel with an ignition switch from there. Now, what you also want to do as well is, if you are using a key barrel, please make sure you connect that to ignition and not accessory feed. If you connect that to accessory feed, what's going to happen is as soon as you move the key to the start position, it's basically going to cut power to that. It's going to turn off your ECU, and you're going to have a real bad time trying to start it, and you're not going to know why. So when you're looking for the ignition on a key barrel, turn the key to the ignition, find it 12 volts, then turn the key to start, make sure the ignition 12 volts stays and doesn't fall away. If it falls away, you've got accessory. If it stays, you've got a proper ignition 12 volt source. Right, after that, we've got number 8, which is pink with a blue tracer. So again, that's the one I'm holding in my hand over there. And that is your alternator light. So that's coming directly from the alternator. All right, and again, I'm taking it to this little box because it's going to transmit that via MPX, and it's going to display the battery light on the dash for me to show me that that is working. And then last but not least, we have the 9, which is the yellow with the black. So that's over there. Now that's connected to the oil pressure switch that's down at the front here. So again, I'm just taking it to here because it's gonna move the oil pressure light onto the dash there for me. We have also taken the oil pressure switch to the ECU as well, so that can be used for a safety strategy. Alongside, obviously, it does have a proper oil pressure sensor, so you can do a lot of the safeties on that in terms of oil pressure and shutting down the engine if you lose it. Right, so that is the 9-pin plug fully complete. I've gone through the entire layout. So hopefully by the time the customer John gets this and gets it on his vehicle, it'll be very easy to install and set up. So what I'm going to do now is we're just going to run through all the tests that we normally do. I'm going to pop back and then we're going to do our usual 2 tests, one with the ignition on and one with the actual engine running. So let me do that and I'll be back in a second. All right, guys, I do apologize profusely. The GoPro lost all the footage that we did of the testing of the Thunder on the 1UZ VVT-i engine. Again, the customer obviously came and took the harness on the same day, so I cannot obviously re-film it. What I will do at the end of this video is I will put a link, or I might do it now, put a link to the other 1UZ VVT-i that we did with a link, so you can see what we would have gone through in the testing. Obviously, we did physically do it here. I just didn't have the footage because the GoPro lost all the video footage, unfortunately. So what I'll also do is at the end of the video, we're obviously going to cut through as per normal to the photos of the completed harness, even before we put it on the engine, etc. And we did miss out on the adaptation that we made with the customer for his pedal because he is using a Tilton set of pedals on that one. So we did actually make him a new harness to go from one of the plugs on the inside over to the other side of the vehicle, and we actually blocked off the pedal harness that was on the engine over there to keep it nice and neat and tidy. So anyway, like I said, we'll cut to the video photos of the complete harness so you can see exactly what it looks like complete. We went through the build photos earlier in the video. And again, I apologize for obviously not having the video of the testing, but like I said, I'll put a link up for our other 1UZ VVT-i that we did with a link. But to make up for it, we do have another link harness going on. This is a Monsoon and it's going on a 1UZ non-VVT-i. So watch out for that video. It'll be coming up in the next 1 or 2 videos from this one. But thanks for watching, guys, again. And like I said, if you have any questions about that particular Thunder setup, you can send us a message or give us a shout. And we'll try and get back to you as soon as we possibly can. Obviously, it is getting a bit crazy now. Obviously, the winter time, everybody's wanting to get their cars finished. So again, I do apologize if some messages are taking a little bit longer to get back to, but we're trying to prioritize everyone on a first come, first serve basis. So like I said, thanks for watching, guys. We will see you in a bit with this link Monsoon on the 1UZ non-VVT-i. So at least we can get that done for you guys and get you a nice video out. But thanks for watching. See you again soon. Bye-bye.